golfers, welcome to Golf in the Cosmos, episode number 39. I'm Kevin Robalski, and here we talk all things Mac O'Grady and MORAD. Today I have two small videos for you, and these are sort of late school MORADs, Mac is describing in one the various planes, specifically shoulder plane, which was a very important aspect in Sam Snead's swing, and that's where the Snead swing influenced MORAD probably the most. And then the second clip is a little, the audio isn't so good, it's a little grainy, but it describes the hip action in the swing. And this was very much influenced by Ben Hogan. So Mac would often describe the MORAD swing as 80% Snead and 20% Hogan. And he liked the anatomical movements of Sam Snead, and he liked the alignments and the impact position and the lack of club face rotation from impact to the finish with Ben Hogan. And there were times where I saw him more preference of Hogan, and then it would switch back to Snead. So this was definitely something dependent upon the way Mac was thinking of things at any given moment. But pretty much the narrative was the MORAD swing was 80% Snead, 20% Hogan. And Mac had a lot of stories about both of these gentlemen. So he would often talk to Sam Snead on the driving range, especially at the Masters, because Sam would play in sort of like little practice rounds and the par 3, and he would show up in the 70s in his 70s on the driving range. I saw him there in 1995. The year Ben Crenshaw won when Harvey Penick passed away, and Mac would tell stories about how he would ask Snead questions about the swing, and he said that Sam Snead kept things very simple. Obviously, he asked Snead what he did, for example, to hit a fade and what he did to hit a draw. And Mac said Snead would always call him Mackie. He said, Mackie, when I want to hit fade, I feel fade. And when I want to hit draw, I feel draw. And that was it. So, Mac, kind of, wanted some technical, maybe a little, interesting, nuanced swing key, but didn't get it. And on the Hogan side, Mac went to Ben Hogan's house. I think it was arranged through Ken Venturi. Now, Ken Venturi was a very important part of the MORAD project. So basically when Gary McCord and Mac were very close and working together in the project, also Venturi was part of sort of the team. But on the down low, Ken Venturi and Gary McCord were also working in television, and so didn't want to create too much bias when Mac was on TV playing, and so they kind of kept it on the down low. But Venturi is on the checklists in the 80s, and definitely part of the team. And I think Venturi arranged for Mac to meet with Ben Hogan at his house. It might have been like a casual meeting, maybe even a lunch. And, Mac came, a little bit armed with, some good questions, and definitely I think he was prepared for Hogan to be a little bit, private, maybe a little cantankerous. But then the opposite actually came true, where Ben Hogan was almost exaggeratedly, positive towards what Mac was doing, and was saying things like, these guys now, the modern pros are so much better than we used to be, and he said that Mac has got it all figured out with the swing, And he didn't really offer Mac a lot. Again, so it was a little, sort of deflating in the sense that, Mac was looking for some real nice technical information and Hogan really didn't give it to him. And so, but what surprised Mac was how complimentary Hogan was towards him and, the pros in general, the modern pros. So that was not what Mac expected. But didn't get the technical insight that perhaps he was, looking for. So one thing that definitely MORAD contributed, especially later MORAD, was to give people permission to turn the hips. So the irony to this is, if you look at Hogan's swing, for example, in this idea that if you put the shaft across your right leg, the hip turns within that leg. But not only does it turn within the leg, it creates a little bit of space. And you can see this space very, very predominantly with Hogan. So it almost looks like his hips will turn and have a slight shift to the left. So center of gravity, COG, with the hips, a little bit left of center. And guys like David Ledbetter, Jimmy Ballard would call this a reverse pivot. But this can be, that term reverse pivot can be interpreted in a lot of ways. So if you feel like the hips are left, that could be interpreted as a reverse pivot. What I interpret as a reverse pivot is what Ledbetter and Jimmy Ballard taught, which is to bring the right hip to the stick, and then the upper body would actually tilt and lean left and inhibit rotation. So to me, the reverse pivot is that way, right? What Mac and Hogan did, and Jose Maria Lothaball, was turn their hips a little bit into the left side, which basically creates the upper body in a very centered position over the ball. And again, keeping the axis more fixed. So this was a very, I think, important contribution to MORAD. Something that I like to do is turn my hips. The odd thing, a little bit odd, is that in the 80s model with Zavin, they really wanted to restrict the right knee movement and limit the hips to about 45 degrees. And so there was more restriction in that. Mac did not like the lower body to be moving around a lot, not so much inward and not certainly to the side. And so, and I think Jim McLean actually took it a step further and created X Factor with that. So X Factor in the 90s was a very popular theme: restrict the hips and turn against the hips. Of course, you can overdo that too, and you can totally limit rotation. So in some bodies where you're very tall, long torso, that would work. But for shorter people or people limited with flexibility, if you don't turn your hips at least 45 degrees, then you're not going to get your shoulders to turn 90 degrees. So, these were some of the nuances that were created, but definitely MORAD in the 2000s even became closing your stance so that you could even generate more turn. But the interesting thing is, when you turned, your left shoulder went down at the same time. So that's where we're talking about shoulder plane. So the line across your shoulders, you basically want your shoulders to turn at right angles to your posture, to your torso tilt, number one, at address. And when that happens, the left shoulder goes down and in. And I think late MORAD started to really perpetuate that downward movement. So Mac really liked the left shoulder to go more downward, right? So that's a staple of his swing. Now, in the 80s, Mac had such low posture that he would raise up, come out of that shoulder plane, especially with the driver. So that was something that certainly you can see in the 80s videos of Mac, mostly with the drivers. And so that was something I think annoyed him. And so he really wanted to keep the left shoulder down and that became a very important part of the MORAD swing. So much so that, you know, he would almost evaluate you on your shoulder plane in terms of how skillful you were, which, you know, to me, I think was overstating that. I've seen a lot of higher handicappers, golfers that shoot in the hundreds, that dip down and lower that shoulder plane, lower that left shoulder if they're a right-handed golfer, and just be a total hacker. If Mac saw that, if he saw your left shoulder going down, he would think you're a virtuoso. He would say the 100 shooter has a better swing than the pro if the pro had flattened their shoulder plane. That's how much he really, you know, merited that particular movement. And he would also, you know, attribute that to athleticism. Now me, teaching probably a broader spectrum of golfers, especially higher handicappers, I don't see any correlation between the shoulder going down and the skill or the athletic ability. It's just, you know, a quirk. I think it has a lot to do with your posture at address. If you stand very tall at address with very little torso tilt, number one, bending over, if you stand very tall, you tend to go down. The brain makes up for that high center of gravity in the swing. And we see this with a lot of modern players. I think posture very tall, and then the left shoulder goes down as a means of finding that perfect center point, right? And that's just something that happens over time. And conversely, if you have too low of posture, if you're bent over too much, you can't really rotate. I can stop about here, but then if I come up and come out of my shoulder plane, then I can turn more. So I think that's more the accurate correlation. It has really nothing to do with athletic ability or skill per se. But it was a very, you know, important thing to Mac. And you can very definitely see this in the Sam Snead model. Sam basically had huge hip turn, left shoulder went way down, right? And then when he finished left and stayed in his tilts in the finish. And so this was the look that Mac really, really liked anatomically in Sam Snead's swing. And so he'll talk a little bit about this in the video. So you actually have the shaft plane, you have the shoulder plane, and then you have the left arm plane. So again, Hogan's contribution to teaching is the pane of glass, where you keep the left arm under that pane of glass that sticks out from the ball, and then there's a hole through, you know, so your head can go in. So the pane of glass goes through your neck, and his idea was you keep the left arm under that pane, right? And so that kind of represents what Mac would call the, you know, the shoulder plane. So you go back here at address, so the club rests at address. Now it's not on, I would say usually if your arms are relaxed, the shaft is not on the swing plane, right? So the swing plane to me is the lie angle at address. So that would be if the club was perfectly flat. Usually the hands would have to be a little bit higher, and then you can go back on one single plane. But generally, when we relax, our arms are hanging down, and you know, I like the low hand, so that rests my shaft on a lower angle. So original Mac MORAD swing was the lower hands, the feeling that the wrists were pre-cocked, and then when I turn, then everything just lines up very nicely at P2, but it's more based on hand path moving on an arc, right? Now that changed a little bit. Mac went into a little bit higher hands and then tried to cock the club up and get the club to P2 through hinging a little bit of the wrist and the right elbow. So again, a little bit of a preset there. Early MORAD, I think the preset was more through the low hands at address and then just the swing path. And then so one way would be, early way would be hands go inside, club stays outside, everything lines up. And then if you continue with this feeling, the shaft is a little vertical at P3. So it's not tracing the line, right? It's a little bit vertical. That's actually helping keep my left shoulder down onto the shoulder plane. Because when I flatten the shaft plane, my shoulder usually goes into elevation and I start to flatten the shoulder plane too, right? So this is a tricky thing. In late MORAD, the whole idea was you got to, kind of flatten the shaft plane and then deepen the shoulder plane. That's very, very difficult. I would not say that's easy on the brain. And then Mac talks about how when he tried to do this left-handed, took him 6-7 years of a lot of practice, daily practice. To me, that's almost too much, especially for the average player. Where original MORAD, you can kind of cock your wrist here at address. P2 lines up because of that preset. And then P3, you allow yourself to be a little more vertical. And then P4 is down the line, right? And then basically, as the downswing unwinds, the forces increase, centrifugal force, and that allows the club head to find its orbit because you're rotating, you're using rotation, to have the club head basically seek its line, right? You're not doing any manipulation, right? It's like Mac will say actually in this video, which is very unusual because this is late MORAD, he actually talks about using centrifugal force, right? So especially as the club gets longer, the centrifugal pull is greater than the centripetal pull, the inward pull. Now, this is unusual because this is very much what he said early on in MORAD, and then he changed it in time where he liked more of a centripetal action, an inward action. But what he's talking about in this video is as the club gets longer, and especially with the driver, that the outward pull is actually stronger than the inward pull. So basically what he's saying is you can go a little inside out with the driver, especially as the club gets longer. It's actually more, desirable. You just let it go, let the force do its work. And I like this idea a lot. And so I think, again, it just kind of demonstrates, how Mac was still, in this mode of refining and researching and questioning even his own, research and, tweaking it, constantly tweaking it, and never really being quite satisfied with what he had, so therefore he never published it. And maybe he kept feeling that in some respects there were holes in the theory, or he need to continually work on plugging these holes. So in some respects, that means adding complexity, and so that can go adding more variables and more information, and then I'm not so sure that serves the student so well. So, but to get back to the videos, we're gonna have the first segment on a lot on plane, and Mac talks a lot about shoulder plane, and again, this is very much inspired by Mr. Sam Snead and his contribution to MORAD. And then second part, you're gonna see Mac working on the hip turn. So I'll be going from this angle, and you can see Mac really opening up his right hip, and that's very much demonstrated and inspired from Mr. Ben Hogan. So we got Hogan and Snead inspired videos. I know everyone will be excited to see that, and wish you all good golfing and be safe. Aloha.
Went out to the bottom of the shaft, and then he would go like this, and would trace that line going, and it keeps going, extending to the parallel. Then the laser coming out this end would pick up the line going like that as well. So if you had a laser, what Butch Harmon and Norman, and those, not Butch Harmon and Ledbetter did, they put the laser on the outside of the shaft. I think they put it,
They put it, because I got it. There's one that goes here, and that guy, I told him to get it, and it was out here, and I looked at it, and it goes in a circle. So he chopped it off and put a pen light in it.
Right, okay. So what happened was Kelly did a school, and Kelly explained that, and then what the guy did, he took the idea and got a patent on it. Didn't give it to Kelly. He went out right away and got a patent on it within a short time frame. He literally got a patent on it. So nobody can put a laser inside the shaft unless they have to pay him royalty right there. But you can put the laser on the outside of the shaft. So what Butch and those guys were doing was what did they say? Was it the downswing they were showing it coming down?
I think they had it going inside out.
That's Ledbetter's.
Is it Ledbetter?
Harmon's is on both, and it's got a roll-out mat. It's got
Yeah.
plain target line and a couple lines going in and out.
So the thing is, but that was Kelly's idea of that. That was Kelly's original idea. And they misconstrued it also, right? The way they're trying to explain things. Right? In your case like this, you're trying to get on the back switch, you got a laser, put it in here like this, turn the lights off in the room, put it down here like this. You got to turn your body. Now watch. If I flatten out my shoulder turn like this right away, look at it. Yeah. But, you know, where does it? You got to get 3 planes like that. You got to get your shoulder plane. You got to get your arm plane. You got to get your shaft plane. 3 of those planes got to be lined up just right. I did that naturally. I had all 3 of those babies lined up right away when I played. I didn't have to make any adjustments. And when I did left-handed, I didn't have them lined up. Okay. When I had to go left-handed, take this, and I took this back, and I just kept the same distance my chin to the ground, like this. I felt like right-handed. I went like this. I was used to it. Mm-hmm. Right? I felt I was dropping that much, right? So, you know, if you don't think that's true, try yourself. You know, you just turn at right angles. If your spine's 40 degrees this way, your shoulder spine's going to be 40 degrees that way. Right-handed, I mean, I can go like this. The problem, I played so much more. Left-handed, I go here like this. Keep that down there like that. Well, because I practiced for so many years, I finally got it in there. It took 6, 7 years to get it in there. So when the average guy, you're telling him to do it. Okay, last one. Let's take a look. Let's finish this up. So you guys take a look. When I start down here, I got to go. What guys do, they go like this, right?
Hey, Mac, let me ask you this, though. Someone, because we're teaching, if someone has that habit, they get to here and they go like this.
With a flat shoulder plane, they come out and the arms
go
are up.
Like this. Yes. You know, I've had people where I've put the club across, made sure it went down, and then I made them feel like that. Okay. Now, when they did it, they went.
They got to come back from the inside.
A little, yeah.
Right, sure, right.
Okay.
Right. You can do it, but if they're not used to that, that's a big dipsy doodle.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going down here like this. It looks like Russ Cochran in that pen. Russ Cochran, the guy went like this and went out like that. So if you're going to go left through impact, your shoulder planes will almost feel like Stevens effect. It goes down. You know why? Because your left shoulder's down. Look at your left shoulder's down. See how easy to get the left arm up? Like this. Then you straighten this out and eyes lined up. And then you can come right around going like that. But if you line this up here like this and the shoulder plane flattens out this way, if you come down like here and rotate straight around that way, now the shaft's going down way too steep. Right? So when guys flatten this thing out here like this, the tendency is right. The left shoulder will go up, keep the left arm back on the inside. Then if they tilt sideways, the shaft is lined up here, then it's going straight and set up. Right? So the thing is, you can play that way. You just have to know how to sequence it. You can play that way. But we will tell you that what you want to try to do also, you want to try to get it where your left arm's parallel. Sequence that. Now if you look at my shoulder, left shoulder, see how the weight transfer, see how.
Yeah.
Then boom. Okay. Creates the inward pull. If you slightly slow down the rotation, then it's called a tangent. There's a tangent line here. As it comes around here like this, you're just moving on a circle. And if you're not fast enough, there's a point here, the tangent point, the club's being pulled straight and straight. Because the outward pull overrides the inward pull. And if you're too slow, it just goes straight like that. Okay? That's called the tangent point. The club will move on a more elongated arc that way, and then it comes back again. Instead of moving on a concentric arc versus the elongated arc. See? The elongated arc is more like trying to go straight line-ish. See? Inside out. The question is, to what degree are you going inside out?
Well, you said once that everyone's trying to get people to go left, but they don't know how to do it.
That's right.
And I saw a guy giving a lesson to a very good player. He's a good teacher, and he was trying to get the person to go left. From left arm in, club shaft in.
Shoulders up.
Yes, like this. And then basically stay in the tilts
Well, that's one
and
way.
pull the hands around like that.
That's one
And
way.
I said, I'm just thinking to myself, I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking, just let her go that way. I mean, it looks, why are you trying to go like that?
It's one thing.
Yeah.
Remember Star Wars? What was the famous line in Star Wars?
May the force be with you.
You got it. So let the force, don't try to, don't fight it. You know, the longer that shaft gets, normally the more wants to go like that. If you don't know how to get that sequence, get that shoulder down, but that shaft goes up going 40, 45, 46, 47.
Okay.
Harder, man. You just,
All right, man.
just let it
See
go.
you here.
But they had in their mind that it should go this way.
Wow,
and it was
that's-
like,
But just the moment.
yeah. You were right, though. You said that.
Well,
You were right. You said that, and then I saw it happen.
so once we get to the center, if I sit here and I start rotating my hip 45 degrees like this, stay in the center, look how this shaft will go to the edge of the pocket here. So this moves to this point right here. If I line this up and I go, as I start rotating, if I move around the center, at the top of my swing now, if you look at my seat, if I go to the top here, move around the center, looks, as this comes to this point, it looks like my lower part of the body is actually moved a little bit left of center. To prove that, if I just move my left knee over, you see that my hips have moved that way and back swing. So I really don't really have to transfer. If I rotate properly, move around the center like this, I'm going to come right to that point here. But now my chest and my head, they're pretty much centered. Take a look. My head and chest look in the center?
Yeah.
Here. Now if I go right away in the downswing, go over here like this, this is why the left can't go up. If you go like this, it won't catch up. That's why the left shoulder, as you start going, it's got to go this way. See? The chest has to start going the same like that to catch up to the hip. Otherwise, the person goes like this. Now the hips are left, the upper part of the body's too far right, and the head's too far right. If you're going to hit the ball over the moon or something, that's okay, right? But in these simple, I'll try again. With this simple little shots,